So I think I've got some repeat people. I was in here yesterday, so thank you for everyone who came back for day 2. These 2 things, it does not want to be closed. So I'll just start some intros here for a little bit. We'll let people trickle in. I am always curious to know who's in the room with me because this conversation can go a lot of different directions depending on the needs of everybody here. So do we have some students in the room perhaps? Awesome, love it. And then is anyone providing resources to entrepreneurs? So you're paid to, SBDC or you're consulting, so okay, awesome. And solopreneurs, who's running solo for right now, awesome. Is anyone over 5 employees at this point? Projecting to be over 5 employees, maybe that's why we're here.
You mean full-time or fractional?
Both. I mean, it could be either. Yeah, that's a good question. Full-time or fractional. So, awesome. All right, so I'm going to keep this as focused on building early teams and small because it seems like that's going to hit the best demographic for this group. But please ask questions. I always say if I talk for 40 minutes uninterrupted, that's a fail. I want this to be conversational. Please jump in, please ask questions, clarify as we go. I also want to hear your success stories, like what's working well, what's not, so we'll just adjust as we go. So I am Wendy Moore. I am the founder of Elevate Talent. I'll talk a little bit about why I'm the person talking to you today, just to give you a little bit of context into what we could cover today. So I started out in economic development. So it was my job. I was in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a great entrepreneurial ecosystem, very big tech hub down there. So it was my job to build entrepreneurial ecosystems. Worked with a lot of grassroots startups in that capacity. Worked with a lot of VCs, angel groups. So everything that goes into the business community, as well as large companies that tech company. We worked across offices all around the world, and I helped to run the remote work initiative for a global tech company. How do you get the human element in tech, and how do you navigate through periods of change and growth? So those are the things that I've carried throughout my whole career, right? Is how do we build entrepreneurship, and how do we navigate through change, growth, periods of transition? And all of that boils up into Elevate Talent, where I work with companies now that are in the growth stage, are scaling up, and how do we strategically find the team that they need? So who to hire, when, because the timing matters a lot, and then how do you do it? So yesterday we talked a lot about like fundamentals of how to decide when and how to hire. I'll touch a little bit on that today, but today is mostly going to be like, how do we recruit? Like, how do I recruit people to my company, and how do I keep them there when I get them? So that's what this is mostly going to be focused on, but this is just a template. We can take this whichever way if you want to ask questions. I like this Phil Jackson quote. So any sports fans here? The strength of the team is each individual member. The strength of each member is the team. I believe very strongly, and the reason I do what I do is because you can have the best idea in the world, but if you do not have the right team members at the right time, it does not matter. You cannot execute on your strategy, you can't execute on your plan. You as a solo founder, you're carrying a lot of weight, you're wearing a lot of hats. So bringing on each strategic team member is going to be so important to the success of your company. So making those decisions is going to have a big ripple effect for short term, immediately how you execute, and long term, how your company scales up and is successful. So we're going to touch on this in a couple different buckets. So like I said, yesterday we talked a lot about the plan. I'll highlight that a little bit today, but today is going to be mostly on how to attract, retain, and then empower your team. So planning, we know. So I work a lot with startups. I also work a lot with nonprofits. They run into similar kind of challenges. You're working with a mission-driven team. They are under-resourced. You typically need really strong values and strong mission alignment to succeed in these environments, but you have to be really scrappy. You have to be willing to wear a lot of hats, and you have to be willing to be agile and adaptable. We talked again about hiring when it matters most. So there's often a struggle between hiring like a generalist who can wear a lot of hats, who can fit a lot of buckets. Half the time when I'm meeting with a founder for that first hire, they're like, okay, I need him to do customer support, sales, maybe a little bit of finance, maybe a little bit of setup for the events, and. They're asking for 15 things out of one person. Those are some really scrappy early employees that you can find, but it's also really important to hire for expertise when it matters most. I see that the most in engineering, very technical roles. You need to be able to build the thing. You can't learn that on the job because nobody has time to teach you. If you need to learn on the job, that's when you should go into corporate, learn on the job, and then come into the startup. In a startup, typically, nobody has time to kind of train up as we go. So hiring for expertise when it matters most. I would carry that over into things that you wouldn't say are particularly technical either. So I see a lot of early sales hires that are either hired too early or they've never sold this type of thing before. And that's really challenging. So if you've only sold in a really big corporate environment with a lot of structure and a business development team that queues up your leads, and then you come into a startup and you're selling something that doesn't exist, and you have to persuade new clients without any brand recognition, that is a very different selling environment. So you'll want somebody in an early sales hire for a startup who's sold other early stage things. That experience is really critical. Or they at least get the difference between that and selling CRM technology with a brand name. So those are some of the biggest kind of misfits that I see in early hiring. And then also hiring that too early. You don't have a structure, you don't have product market fit. They're not really set up for success. I love a good phased hiring approach. So when you're doing your plan, that's what's the next best hire. But keep in mind what the next two that you're not hiring right now are, but you know is coming. And this is really big for scaling up. So for example, I have 10 customers right now, and so I know I need X number of employees in these seats to handle those 10 customers. But then with success, I'm going to need now 2 in this bucket, 2 in this bucket. And so each one of those teams is going to scale itself up with your success. So as you're building this kind of phased hiring approach, assume success and keep an eye on what's working and what you want to repeat and what you don't want to repeat. Back to that sales example, if the founder has the bandwidth to do so, I often recommend hiring 2 salespeople at a time. Because one, they kind of play on each other. Competitiveness is the nature of sales, and it's also a good incentive. With their success comes the success of the company. And they can also, you can start to see how different systems are actually working or not working. Now, sometimes they're both on commission-only structure, so it's less risk for the founder, but there's a huge upside with their success. And you can start to really vet out your product market fit within sales. That's a nice thing to do. If you do have a base plus commission, that can sometimes be a little bit more challenging to budget for, but it's still a really great way to vet out something and see if it's working or not. Any questions about this before I move on? This is all the planning side so far. Okay. All right, so this is where we're going to spend the most amount of time. This is where I have the most fun. So this is the attract. So I want to talk a little bit about the talent gap because this is very real. You're hearing a lot about the crazy job market out there. There are a lot of very talented people on the job market today. These stats are actually a little bit skewed because it was from, everything's always runs about a year behind. So the sheer amount of layoffs, the sheer amount of technical talent on the market, this looks a little bit different, but it's still true. You have about 70% of corporations out there struggling to find the people to fill the jobs that are already open. It's taking longer to find people. It's taking longer to vet good, talented people. You have hundreds of applications flooding in per job, so just sorting through the noise is half of the challenge for these recruiting teams. If every unemployed person in the country filled an existing open job, we'd still have 4 million open jobs. And this is skilled talent. So this is where there's probably a bit of a disconnect. You hear in the news, right, there's a lot of people, there should be a lot of jobs, we should be able to match that up. But we're talking about skilled talents, people with the experience in the jobs that actually are open right now. Right now, Missouri has 60 workers for every 100 open jobs. So again, these are a little bit skewed based on the last year because this is data from 2023 going into 2024, but it's still valid. Because what that means for you as a startup is you're competing against known entities. People want stability, they want benefits, and so when you're looking for talent, you're having to persuade somebody that your job is a better opportunity than something they could get that does pay them benefits and has the perception of more stability than what a startup would have. And honestly, half the time, they just don't know you exist. So that's why I do what I do, is we take jobs to the people and present them with the opportunity to turn down. They're typically not looking. 70% of the workforce is considered passive talent. So what passive talent means is that they have a job, it's okay, but they would consider something else. So that's where recruiting and that outbound sourcing component comes into play. Historically, companies have posted a job, people apply, you sort through the applications that come in, and you pick the best one out of that. That does not work anymore. That kind of structure does not really work for the people posting the jobs or for the applicants, to be honest. When you post a job like that, you're expecting my job is going to get in front of the right talented person at the right time. They're going to have the time to apply to it. I'm going to see their application. I'm going to have time to review their application, and I'm going to have time to send them through an interview. So it relies a lot on very key timing to just happen. So that's where recruitment has really taken the jobs to the talent. Typically, we're targeting these passive talent. They're typically working somewhere else. They might be working for one of your competitors, or they have worked for somebody in a similar industry in the past, and you want them to come build for you. Good example, and I'll also highlight here before I move on, that the competition is also not local. Remote jobs have made it so that employees can take a job literally anywhere in the world at this point. So when you're competing for the right talented person at the right time, you're not just competing against Kansas City. You're competing against literally the globe and all of the different types of ways that people can work everywhere else. Now, I'm not trying to set a dire tone here, but I do always like to set the reality of what it's like to get your job in front of the right person. And so in recruitment, what we do so much of is we identify people who are skilled in what you're looking for. And this is both technical and ideally we start to get into values and culture alignment as well as we get to know the candidates. But we're taking the job to them. We're saying this is an amazing startup, building an amazing thing. They have a great mission, and you're a talented person that we want to build on this team. And it takes us taking it to them. Now, if you can't hire a recruiter, if you're early, you can do this too. So what I used to do back before I was a recruiter is I'd get on LinkedIn and I'd use some keywords in the search and I'd search my network. And I'd search engineers, back-end engineers, I'd search the languages. All of that is searchable in LinkedIn to you as a person who's just on there. And so look at who's in your network that you wouldn't have thought of. Look at who's connected to people. Look at your second and third connections and send them a message. It takes a little bit of time, but it doesn't take, all I have to do is say no, but then ask them if they know somebody else. That's what I would do if I was a founder with zero recruiting dollars, to go out and try to find those first technical talent, salespeople that you're looking for, any one of these types of roles. Now, I do a lot in tech, so if you are hiring for like a physical location, right, this is gonna look different. So if you're doing food or retail or something that requires somebody to be within this geographic area, physically on site, that's when you need to get to know your neighborhood a little bit more, right? That could be a job fair, like throwing some kind of interesting event that like pulls in the same type of people who might want to work for you. That's getting to know schools, that's getting to know community colleges, it's kind of getting through there. We talked a little bit about your event space, right? So it's going to look a little bit different if you have a physical location that you need to staff versus a tech startup that could be anywhere. Any questions about any of that before we move on? The one thing I'll just add, just LinkedIn is all keywords, right? People put it in their profile, they put what they are, they put where they've worked. So if you're targeting, again, like it doesn't have to be a direct competitor, but an adjacent type of industry, or a technology you know uses the same tech stack you do, or something along those lines. So it does take a little bit of digging and research. There are recruiters who do this for you, So, but if you were just looking on your own, that's a great way to start. So I'm going to talk a lot about the retain and empower side of this, because the way we've set this up is why do people, this does hit attraction as well, but why do people come and stay at your company? We know finding people is hard, keeping people is harder, and the cost of replacing them is significant. And these are really average cost to replace employees, 100 to 150 of their annual salary, 200 plus if it's an executive. I feel like this hits even harder when you're a small business. This is really corporate numbers that they're pulling these from. And that's with a structure and a team, and there's other people who can take on those resources. When you're a startup and you're 5 employees and one of those 5 employees leaves, that hits hard. It means the other 4 people absorb that work, or you as the founder absorb 100% of it. Time stops, customers don't get fulfilled. It's really hard, especially if they do like a 2-week notice situation or walk out quickly. So the retention side of this, I cannot stress enough how important it is to keep your A players empowered and happy and strong and keeping close to that. So I want to talk a little bit about why people come and stay. So in HR, we call this the employee value proposition. I like this because it's a really holistic view of what motivates employees to come and stay. And I look at it mostly on what makes them thrive, how helps them contribute, and then what helps them actually grow within your company. So it's made up of these 4 buckets. And you'll notice material offerings is last. That's compensation. That's typically what everybody focuses on. Everybody thinks people come for cash. And yes, we all work for monetary value. But the other things are what matter most when it comes to, or they're all equally important, I would say. Not even most, but they're all equally important, and they all contribute to that more holistic reason why people are coming to your company and staying. So if I'm out there recruiting, I want to have a message that incorporates all of these things. So I'm talking about the meaning and purpose behind our business. And you don't have to be like a traditionally socially conscious company to do this. This could be literally anything. I'm blanking now on like good examples, but if anybody's seen just very traditional, like think about like T-Mobile, right? They provide data and cell phones. But they talk about connectivity, they talk about community, they talk about all of these different types of values that they exhibit. So it's more of a commodity type service, but they still go at it from a values-driven perspective. Now, if you are a values-driven startup, this is even easier. Growth and development, one of the number one things that the next generation coming up into the workforce is listing is we want growth. We want to be able to be developed in our career. We want to have growth opportunities, so they're listing growth opportunities as the reason they choose the job. This has always been true, but it's becoming even more true as we have kind of this next generation coming up. Be curious what the students in the room think of that, but that's what we're starting to see in HR. Connection and community. This is why people stay. They want to feel connected to their coworkers. We talked yesterday about some really good ways to build community even within a remote workforce, and so we'll hit on that a little bit as well. But how do you build connection to your colleagues, to the company, to your clients, all of those types of community, and so we'll brainstorm that. A lot of this feels out of reach for a small team, and it's not, because you just need to do what makes sense for you at scale. So if you're a 5-person team, that's totally fine. I was employee 4 at the first startup I joined. Believe me, we had a really good connection and community. Like you're working 24 hours a day, sleeping on the couch kind of a vibe. So we built connection, but it doesn't have to be that extreme to be able to have that type of connection. And then we'll talk about material offerings. That's compensation, that's benefits, but there's creative ways to do that if you're cash strapped still. So meaning and purpose, this is what's higher than you. Right? What is bigger than my day-to-day job? And so my day-to-day might be doing customer support calls for technical support, and our clients are calling in, and I'm starting to get into the grind, but we need to elevate that experience. Like, why are we doing that? This is the why. Having the positive impact, so bringing it back to those client stories, inspiring and being a little bit more motivating than getting down into the day-to-day grind. So one of my favorite stories about this, so there's a study by Adam Grant, and if you don't follow Adam Grant, he's an organizational psychologist. So he studies and researches organizations and how they work together. And one of my favorite stories around motivation is how they increased university fundraisers, output, and retention. So if you know about university fundraisers or advancement offices, these are the people who call you after you've graduated and they ask you to give more money back to your university. I get hit up by them all the time from Mizzou. And it's a hard job. They get hundreds of no's every single day. Their retention is really low because it's a grind. It is you're calling through call lists, you get a lot of no's, you get probably a lot of negativity. So just historically, it's a really difficult job to keep retention and to keep them motivated. So they did a study on how do we get these people more motivated and more attached to their job. And so they brought in a scholarship student because most of the reason these fundraisers are raising money is to be able to provide scholarships for people to go to college. It's a great mission. And so they brought in a scholarship student to give a 5-minute story about the impact that that money had on that person's life and how they had been a first generation to be able to go to school. They got a chance to go through and what their dreams were after they left college. It wasn't anything really scripted. It was just real, and it was real impact. And they saw a 400% increase in productivity for that team, like drastically higher. They also saw a huge impact on retention as well. So people were staying in those jobs. So they started making that a regular thing. This is really easy to do, even as a very small team. You just share the successes for your clients. So if you're serving clients, and it doesn't matter what type of service you are, if you're an IT consultancy, have your client share the impact of the solution that you provided with the team. So not just to you, the founder, or not just to your salespeople, but to your whole team. So that everybody on the team who might be stuck a little bit in the grind starts to see those successes, starts to see those positive stories, and they're going to carry that into the next shift. So if we talk a little bit about growth and development as well. So these, again, a lot of the founders I work with, when you're small, you're like, I don't have budget for that. Like, I don't have time or budget to spend a lot of time sending my people or training my people or doing all of that development work. And so there are ways to do this to get that kind of continuous learning and higher performing employees without a lot of dollars. And so some of the more creative things that I've been seeing, so you have the traditional stuff, right? Send them to conferences like this. This is a free conference. This is a great learning and development type of thing. Kansas City has a ton of this kind of stuff. But I'm a big fan of speed mentoring. So we see, we were just talking about mentoring at the lunch session, right? And a lot of mentors will decline taking on a formal mentorship because there's a lot of time, it's commitment, we don't know how long it's gonna go. I like the idea of a speed mentoring. And if you don't have time as a founder to do this, have them do it with an executive that you're friends with, maybe a partner of the business, but just ask for a coffee mentoring session, one time, one hit, less than an hour, and you can still get knowledge, prep your employee to go in prepared, to have an ask, have some specific questions. This is a really great way to give growth and development opportunities using your own connections for your employees and help them come up in their career. These are the type of things people stay for. One of my first jobs, right, I answered a blind job ad for a receptionist role, turned into an office manager, turned into an operations manager. I got to work my way up, right? Why I stayed there for 4.5 years was because I was in the room with really cool executives doing really cool things. So I didn't care that I was in the corner taking notes for those meetings. I was in the room and I was learning from them. So that's the kind of growth and development that you can provide without a lot of dollars. So take them to chamber events, take them to economic development events in town, conferences like this. These are things that are actually $0 out of your pocket, but keep people loyal and happy, and they're growing. So they're gonna get that benefit, those connections, and bring it back to your team. Yeah.
Just something else I've seen too is there's many free resources too. So like just shout out for the library. LinkedIn Learning is a free resource if you have the library. Find courses in LinkedIn Learning that your employees might like.
Yeah. But
also let them do it on work time.
Yes.
If you tell them we want you to learn and grow, but you can't do it during 8 to 5, like no.
It's a great point.
give them, like, let them have the calendar blocks, lead by example, and then, like, let them do that in that calendar block. I've just seen so many on the flip side of, you want to learn and grow, that's awesome, but, like, do it on your own time. We need you to do our stuff on our time. And they will leave you.
I love that call out. So yes, growth and development hours should happen on company time. Even if it's not company dollars, it's company time. And that is company dollars, let's be real, because you are paying them to do so. I'm also a big fan that if you do a lunch and learn, let them also have an actual lunch break. That's just a different kind of plug. I don't know how many types of things that I've sat in where you lose your lunch break for a lunch and learn, and I'm like, so I'm a big fan of, again, making sure that you're taking care of your people and making sure that those breaks are being taken, vacation, all that's being taken. But when you provide those opportunities, yes, company time, company resources if possible, because that's just making them better. I also like to ask employees to bring to their regular check-ins that you should be having with them ideas on what they could do to get better in their job. So maybe it's a certification, maybe it's an online class, maybe they found a webinar they want to take and it costs, you know, $30 to register for the webinar, whatever it is, but ask them every time you meet, is there a resource that you need or something accessible? And again, you can have a small budget for that, send it, and it's a great way to keep everyone growing and developing, makes you better. You know, we talk about conferences, content, all of that. Moving through these pretty quickly, so I love to hear stories like that, so keep jumping out. But the connections and community side of this, again, meaningful bonds and the connections are why people stay. You know, they say that most employees leave bad managers. They also stay for good managers, and they stay for good coworkers. I can tell you the amount of jobs I've stayed in because I really liked my team. Nothing else about the company was that great, but I really liked my team. And so you stick it out longer, or you'll work through the rough stages. And especially in a startup, when you're going through a lot of growth and transition, there are rough stages no matter how good that company is. And so it's these type of sticky bonds that make it fun still, or make those hard seasons a lot more palatable when you're going through them. When we talk about connection and community, ERGs come up a lot, so employee resource groups are used a lot in very large corporate environments. But I love to see something like that translate into a smaller space. So typically when you talk about employee resource groups, there's a theme around it. There's a local insurance company where I live in Columbia that has like an AI learning ERG. Right? It's just people who are passionate about AI. They don't use it in their job. They just want to learn more about it. And it's been going for a long time, long before ChatGPT. So I'm sure it's bigger now. Or I'm a casual investor on the side, so I want to just meet with people and talk about my last Robinhood like investment. Or I'm just really into sports and I want to talk about, you know, the Chiefs. These don't have to be formal, and they usually are not work related. They can be work related, but they don't have to be. It's a great way to celebrate diversity in your team. It's a great way to foster that kind of community. And it's a really interesting thing to bring down from a corporate perspective into a small business and make it accessible. You can also do this across other companies. So we were a really small team when I was scaling up. So when we were still under like 20 employees, there wasn't a ton of like-minded interest groups we could have spun out within our team. We were already doing it. But we were housed in a building with a couple other companies. So we'd spin up meetups and we'd spin up other things with the other startups that were in the same building as us. So there's ways to make this kind of community even outside of your own 2, 3, 5-person team early on. What I've been seeing a lot in recruitment is these community groups for alumni of your organization, or for interested parties but you don't have a job opening yet. Now this is more of a lift if you have an HR team or a talent team, like the kind of things I work on, but I'll just mention it. So if you have really loyal alumni from your company and your startup, my last startup, I'm still very much a part of every holiday party. I still go to all of the celebrations. It's like I never left, right? And we have a whole group of alumni who left for whatever reason, but we're still really loyal to that team. And so you can keep this kind of environment going And from a recruitment perspective, these kind of people are great referral sources. So you can refer other people back into that company if you're looking for any specific talent. So I'm a big believer in thinking outside the box when it comes to how do you recruit and who's in your network that you can keep loyal to you for those kind of attraction efforts. Has anyone else seen some interesting kind of community groups, connection done within organizations that you liked? It's a very quiet group today.
We had a DEI one.
Yeah.
Agency that I worked at.
Mm-hmm. How did they kind of create community? So you did DEI one, so yep.
Yeah, so it was a global organization, so we would do breakout groups over Zoom.
Yep.
And so it's usually start as like a larger meeting with a presentation, and then we'd all break out. But then from there, they built smaller groups that would meet, quarterly or whatever.
Love it.
And support people, but they kind of got that going right as I was exiting the company. So.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of good initiatives within DEI to be able to address, like, again, specific employee groups that want to have community within a community. So you have the broader team, the broader mission that everyone's bought into, but then we want to be able to have pockets of like-minded people to be able to talk, create safe spaces, create conversation, or cross disciplines as well. So I like that, and we see this a lot in large corporate, so that's why we're trying to bring it into the smaller organizations. So
my startup was in an accelerator program with EY, and one of the things that EY did is they have this thing called the Hive, which they essentially bring in a startup group, and this Hive is, I think, like a global group of like 250 to 300 people around the world.
Yeah.
And they'll just jump in on a Zoom call basically and like listen to your pitch. And then what they'll do is like everyone will just write ideas or concepts or whatever. And then at the end of this hour-long meeting, you just get like 250, 300 ideas of what you could do next.
I love it.
The way they were pitching it to their employees was that it was a way for them to like get out of the humdrum of the day-to-day and see some of the cool things that EY is supporting with some of the startups that they're working with.
Yeah.
And of course for the startups, as us, it's like, you get a brain dump of like.
Yeah, you get the Hive mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've heard good things about the Hive through EY because that's a great way, one, to get the mission of EY for their day-to-day employees into the work of what they're funding, and it's a huge benefit to the actual funded companies. So I love that. Yeah.
I was a fractional creative head of a global product brand, and one of the things that we did as a team, so we had team members all over the place, we would do quarterly photo shoots, and they would basically be meetups where like we would bring some of the team out, where we would choose locations where some of the team members were. So there were, people maybe in Portland, so we did one of the things there, we all got together there, and not all of the team went, but about half of the creative team got to go. And
Love
so
that.
Also, what made that extra special was we would also bring in, we put a call out to our customers. And so we would put call outs based on where we were to invite them in to like collaborate and be a part of what we were doing in our marketing efforts.
What a good tie-in. I love that. So thank you.
We do some passive things. So my team is a team of 5 of us total, and we are kind of all over the place. We're always going to different places, but at our main kind of like hub of where we're at and where our cubicles are, we have like color sheets out on the tables. We have a monthly like little craft. Like go to Hobby Lobby when it's 50% off. You can get like 20 little color your own pumpkins for like $2. And so we have those every month where they're seasonal, and maybe we're doing it together, maybe we're doing it on our own time, but like it's the ability to stay connected. You can see what your other coworkers are doing. We did like a vision board workshop with each other a couple weeks ago, so there's a lot of ways to do it without a lot of money. And then if you have, like you were saying, like people all over the place or people that aren't on very similar schedules, there are things that you can just have there that are really passive, that are really cheap. Like guys, color pages are free. Like, don't print them off
Just
of
print it.
Canva, you know
If
what
you
I mean?
have a printer.
Yeah, like if you have a printer and if you don't go to the library, it's 10 cents for
Yep.
black and white. But like, there's just a lot of fun, passive, seasonal ways that you can
Yep.
keep people connected. And so like we have a place where all of our color pages go.
Love it.
You know.
Yeah. And yeah.
Touching on what she said, at one of the other meetings I was in, they mentioned that they had a table in their office, and I thought this was really good. It's a brainstorming table. And that's kind of like what she said, and if you did it with seasonality, you can make it a lot of fun.
Yep.
And every season wrap up. Like I mark it 3 times a year. If I were to do that for each one, then people could come up with different packages and different ideas and cool ideas for
Yeah.
the different markets.
Yep.
That's a really good idea. And then the whole fact that they're getting creative.
Yeah, I love all these crafty
Even more
teams.
fun.
So
Yeah, have fun with it. It's not just go think about it.
I've worked with a lot of like mostly male tech companies, so the crafts come up less for some reason. But I really like it. But I think that there's ways to again like have that translate
Sometimes don't think
and make it like relevant to your team. Yeah.
Go by the Lowe's kids. Lowe's has kids, that's manly.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I think everybody can benefit from crafting. So there's yeah. Mhm.
So I know we think about that in terms of the really large companies here in Kansas City that put these massive teams together, but they have different divisions, and so it goes all the way down to really to smaller businesses, and so especially if you've got team members that are remote or partially remote, you have the opportunity for folks to come together and they're engaging in a way that's outside of your normal business operations. That creates a really great sense of camaraderie and teamwork.
Love that. How do people get plugged into that? So the Kansas City Corporate Challenge.
How do you get plugged into
Yeah. How would
You can just go on the website.
Okay.
And sign up. I mean, companies sign up as an entity, and it's on a sliding scale in terms
Okay.
of the number of employees and what you pay to register. But then they've got competitions. They run the gamut from softball to pickleball to I think they added archery at one point. So it's just all sorts of different things.
That's fun.
And folks may or may not have experience with a given sport. It's a great way to learn together and cheer each other on. And
I think they also
That's awesome.
have some like less athletically inclined stuff. So I want to say they even have like office chair race,
Okay.
like office chair relay. So I would agree, like KC Corporate Challenge is really cool, but it's not just for like
Yeah.
athletic people. You can be not.
It doesn't have to
athletic,
be
so-
pickleball competition.
like,
Yeah.
you don't have to
I like that.
run.
That's a really good call out. Thank you.
and they're regularly changing up the different activities.
Well, and I wanted to bring up some of the things we talked about yesterday, right? So a lot of what we were talking about is in person, but we were brainstorming ideas again to stay close and build community within a remote team because we're seeing more and more of that, or a hybrid team. And so one of the just methods we brainstormed yesterday, I'm a big fan of setting communication channels very clearly within your team and how to use them. So Slack is very common. You don't have to use Slack. There's Teams. There's a lot of different chat, but just talking about like a Slack channel, you can use that for work and should. There's great ways to set up product channels. Also use it for check-ins. Use it for fun. Use it for camaraderie or community. You can create a lot of asynchronous community, so you don't all have to be on the same call at the same time necessarily. And you can set the precedent that this is fun, this is open, let's share memes about our day, let's share celebrations, let's share wins as they happen. And that's a great way to kind of tie in your team to sharing those kind of celebrations together. Yeah. Pet features, yes. Yep. 100%. And that's the thing. I mean, I'm part of run one for my own company and then for some of my clients as well. And then I also run some that are within the entrepreneurial community. I want like-minded founders. So we had quite a few solopreneurs in the house. It's lonely to build, it is hard to build, and sometimes you need an outlet outside of your team when you start building because you're trying to shelter them from the hard and you just need to be able to talk to somebody. So I'm part of quite a few founder-led groups as well where we have the celebrations, the wins. I have one that's like just called like for those kind of days, and it's just full of like, customer stories, roll your eyes kind of thing. But it's a safe space for us to share within, and it builds the most incredible community. I know people from all around the world I never would have known just through that kind of a community.
How did you find this?
I'll hit you up because I know you're fractional as well, so I'll send you to a few of them. Yeah. But there's community for almost everything, right? So if you're a fractional executive and you work within multiple types of companies, there's groups for that. I have some within like fractional people leaders specifically. So those are things that I find. There's AI groups, there's new idea founders, event founders, whatever you may need. So finding that type of community as well as a founder is so important because you need an outlet as well, and you can pick up ideas for how they're leading their teams and how they're, building community. So, but yeah, some of my favorite Slack channel ideas are, pets. I have a book club running in one where one is, actual like leadership business type books, and one is total just fiction, fun, everything you can think of. Having those kind of connections that are unrelated to the job, the work, the grind every day, that's what builds this type of community and what makes people stay. So, how are we doing on time? All right, we're doing good. So let's talk about material offerings. So this is what everyone expects to talk about when we talk about attraction and retention. And it does matter. Again, there's a reason why there's 4 pillars here. So one of the caveats I say is your salaries need to be competitive, or you need to be offering something in addition to the salaries to make it competitive. So we brainstormed a little bit about salary plus equity, right? I see that a lot because I work with startups who have equity to give. Now, if you don't have equity to give because your company isn't split up that way, you're not pursuing funding, that looks different. But there are other ways to provide benefits that aren't necessarily cash in hand. If you have an actual service, giving free services to that, we'll get into that. Also, performance-based initiatives. We see this, the incentives. We see this the most in sales, but it can translate across any other role. If somebody is doing really well in their role and money is coming in because of it, reward them for that. Sometimes that's direct bonus, which I would recommend because most people do prefer that, to be able to choose what they want. Or it can be a gift card, or it can be a lunch. I don't like to lean on those kind of things necessarily because people do first come to work for a competitive salary, and we have to acknowledge that, make sure that it's a sustainable job for them to be able to stay with you and continue with you. That's the hardest thing about startups. We see people leave because they literally cannot sustain the lifestyle in that company, even if they may love it. And so they can spend a couple years, but circumstances change and that salary is not competitive enough. So as soon as you can, get to market-ready salaries. And if you want help deciding what market-ready salaries are, you can call me, you can do some research on that, try to get a feel for what's competitive in your market and what's relevant. Providing benefits, we know this is hard. It doesn't have to be traditional health benefits, but getting to that, again, as quickly as you can as an employer should definitely be on your roadmap as you scale up, because this is one of the biggest pain points for employees as we're trying to get out there and join a workplace. So unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of people leaving the startup life and going back into corporate because of the benefits, because of the stability, the structure, because startups are so volatile and because there's such an ebb and flow, and that's natural, but it does not fit everybody's personal needs. But you can get there a couple different ways. So I do like to cite this one though. So material offerings are the easiest lever to pull. So you could give that bonus, you can give a cash bonus, and they're immediately appreciated, but they're also the easiest for your competitors to copy, and their impact on retention is the least enduring thing you can pull. So the community, the connections, the growth and development, everything else that we've talked about today, those are the enduring impact kind of things. Those are the sticky reasons people stay. This, money, is immediately appreciated, but it is the least enduring, which means I can get a bonus for Christmas and then walk away, and in March I'm done. Maybe I just stay just to get past that cash bonus and then I leave. We see a lot of that, right? And so it is the least sticky thing in this, but it is important. So, I mean, only 12% of employees actually leave for more money. They're leaving because of all those other things. They're not getting the growth that they want. They're not getting the meaning and value out of this that they're looking for. These are some of the more creative things I've been seeing on alternative benefits. So material offerings. So we obviously have the main ones: compensation, health benefits. But these are some creative ones in addition to. We're seeing childcare benefits coming up. Maybe you could create a partnership with one of the childcare providers in town, figure out some kind of service share there. We're seeing wellness stipends. I'm a big fan of mental health benefits. This could be as robust as gym memberships, or again, a partnership with a therapy clinic in town, or it could be a subscription to Calm or Headspace. It does not have to be overly spendy. It just has to show the value to the employee, and it's something that they want and something they care about and provides value to them. I love to give a birthday PTO day, and it could flex, so like if it randomly lands on a Wednesday, they could flex it to like Monday or Friday, but give them a day for their birthday, for their work anniversary. Those kind of things are very easy, it's memorable, it's nice to have, it's a nice little bonus PTO day. Volunteer for PTO. Again, you're trying to build other community, other ways to collaborate within the place that you're working. So if they're going out and volunteering hours, have them earn PTO that way. And then doing matching donations as well. So if they donate to a charity of their choice, if you can match it as an employer, I always love to see it. You see that so much in corporate. These are definitely things that can translate down into a smaller organization. You can cap it. You can say, I'll match up to $200. It doesn't have to be significantly spendy, but it does show value, and it shows your alignment with something that they care about. And then recognition points, this can come up in a couple different ways. Again, these are things we see a lot in sales. There's some obvious incentives built into the sales model that I love to translate across other things. So if you have a customer support team that's doing a lot of calls, that's doing a lot of work, and your customers are being retained, reward them for that work, the same way you might reward sales for getting a new sale. So you can track things, you can earn recognition points, and you can get to this in a way that's not overwhelming from an employee standpoint. Has anyone else seen any other cool like incentives or fun ways to give back? Yeah, you have so many good ideas. I love it.
Sorry. I feel like
No,
I
keep
feel
it going,
like
Tracy.
company
I love it.
Culture, so I just,
Yeah,
in this space.
that's
but
why you're here.
More recommendation I would also say is ask your people what they want and what they would benefit from.
Yeah.
So I saw one where they like gave everybody a free day and took them to a professional baseball game and gave them all some tennis shoes. And some of the people hated it, right? Because like, yes,
Yeah.
you get a free day, but like I would be with them. I'm like, I don't want to go to a baseball game. I
Right.
would rather stay and do my job. And so I just, as much as you possibly can,
Yeah.
ask your team what they want, and then do as much as you can within that, and then only ask things that you can also provide. So if
That's a
they're
great
going to
point.
say, "Oh, I'd love a 200% raise," well, okay,
Yeah.
sorry, we can't do that. But here's the things we can do. Here's the things we've been
Right.
looking at. Rank them. Which of the following would you want to have? Because they may not have any desire to go volunteer, right?
Yep.
But then you might have staff that's like, let's all do it together. So I would just really recommend asking them. It can be a really quick survey. It can be anonymous. It can be a team meeting. It's really easy to find out what they want.
Yep. And I think that's a great point, and I love that. So I would echo, yes, ask your people what's important to them. We were talking earlier about different types of team building, and not everything is for everyone. And so getting to know your team, what makes sense for them, having enough diverse perspectives at the table to where you understand that, again, maybe a really athletic competition versus a really crafty competition versus, like, not everybody likes everything. You could also, again, do different types of activities on different days so people feel represented and maybe stepping outside their comfort zone for this, but then their colleagues are coming to them in their space on a different day. So you can get creative about how you approach that, but yes, ask your people.
So at the company that
I worked at, they was really pushing for psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they acknowledge is that sometimes you don't feel comfortable coming forward with something that you see going on. And it could be things outside of work that make you question stepping forward. So they created this fund where every employee got $500 to spend on things for mental health, but you could also use it for exercise equipment to go to a play or to
Yep.
get a massage and all
Love
these
that.
other things. So you can even use it to pay for student loans. And
Mhm.
it's all these ways to support you, so when you feel more comfortable and you can trust a company to then come forward if you see something going wrong.
I love that. That's a great example of providing something really tangible, providing psychological safety. So I'll repeat it in case anyone didn't hear, but this company gave $500 to be used toward mental health initiatives, but that could be whatever you wanted it to be. So it could be gym equipment, could be a wellness app, or it could be paying down student loans, which again, we can all relate, could relieve some stress. So I think that's a great example of letting them lead and not forcing a specific idea. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
I thought I would offer a flex lunch for my employees because it's a day job, and where they can take 1 hour and split it up however they want it. Like if you got to get your kids on and off the bus, because so many times that's a problem, staying in the office. On and off the bus, you got and every day, as long as your clients, your travelers
Yeah.
are taken care of, then you can just do that. So I thought that would be something that would kind of be nice. And I had thought about eventually getting someone on call for like incentives for when people do sell a really nice package or something, and have a wellness expert there to and offer either hair, nails, reflexology, massage, something like that. Something that makes you feel really special, like you worked hard. I thought it would give incentive to do that more.
Yeah. I like that.
Schedules, I see
Yeah.
a lot of that. So like you're available for work between 10 and 2, but
Yeah.
the other 4 hours of the day can be within your schedule. I see a lot of companies doing that as well.
Yeah. If you can provide it, flexible work is one of the biggest reasons why people will stick with one of your companies. Work-life balance is cited a lot, and this is if their job doesn't have to be done 9 to 6, 9 to 5, then give some flexibility for that. If it does, set some parameters around when and how there's flexibility there. I see this in commuting as well. So if they're an accountant, back office, and it does not matter during the office hours, but they want to be home to see their kids. I see a lot of people working 7 to 3, avoid the commuting traffic, able to see the kids one side or the other. Hybrid work. One of the kind of fun things that I see a local organization doing is they have a random sunshine day. So if it's just like a particularly beautiful weather day, the CEO will call off work, and it's always spontaneous. So it's like a surprise sunshine day, and I love that because she makes the call. Everybody knows they have permission and autonomy to go out and do whatever they want that day. Please enjoy the weather. And I just think, again, that's just a great tone to set as a leader, which is we want to prioritize you, your mental health, and your balance more than this. And she's making a call that it's okay to do that. Like, we're fine.
Over the holidays, I worked for a company that gave us off between Christmas and New Year's.
Yep.
We didn't have to use PTO, but the office was
Yep.
completely closed. Like, who's even working those times?
Yeah.
Anyway? It's closed.
One of the offices I worked at did that, but for the people who needed, so in that circumstance, there was a lot of hourly workers who wouldn't have been paid during that stretch if they took it off. So they did provide projects that people could work on if they needed to. And I liked that balance because, again, Christmas to New Year's is a dead zone for a lot of organizations. But if you're hourly, then that can be kind of tricky. So, yeah.
In reference to the flexible schedule, not only the hours, but some people might want to prefer to work 4/10s or to have that extra day off for whatever reason. So it's not just about the hours per day, but like what the work week actually looks like. If your business can sustain it, if
Right.
you need to have people working 5 hours a week or 5 days a week, that's different.
Yep.
But if it's really about just the productivity and the work they're doing, and they can do 4/10, some people will stay on and work longer just to have that extra day off because
Yep.
it gives them, especially a weekday, it gives them the ability
Yeah.
to have appointments and all kinds of things that they can do that you can't necessarily do on the weekend.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So again, for day work weeks, They kind of hit a peak, and then some people pulled it back. So it definitely is very contingent on the organization that you're with, if that works for you, your people. But I do see that working really well for some groups, for sure. So, love it. Love all these creative ideas. Yeah?
I'm kind of wondering, how significant of an effect have you seen, like the increase in like flexible scheduling after COVID? Like, how much of an impact has it had on?
So the question is increase in flexible scheduling after COVID, like how much? I would say it increased significantly and now it's going back. There's huge trends to return to office. There's huge tightening of flexible work schedules. It probably swung pretty hard the other way too quickly in a lot of ways, and now there's a bit of a re-leveling. I was part of a remote workforce initiative long before COVID and long before remote work really took off for a global company. And it takes a lot of really strong parameters of expectations to be successful with that. And so I think a lot of companies reached a little too far. They didn't have the infrastructure, they didn't set expectations, and now they're clawing it back. I think that's unfortunate because I loved the progress that we saw for remote work after COVID. I am a huge proponent of if your work can be done remotely, it can be, but it also doesn't work for everybody. So there are some people who prefer to work within the structure of an office. They don't have a home office set up at home. They might have kids at home, so they don't have the peace and quiet. Sometimes you just need that mental space to retreat to. If I didn't have a dedicated home office at home, it wouldn't work for me. So I step into that, I'm working. If I step out, it's not. But that's not always the case. So I do think that if you set up remote or hybrid work, the expectations have to be really clear. The company should provide equipment, not having people use their own equipment. So if I'm going to pay for you to sit in an office, I'm also going to pay for your equipment to sit at home. And that there's expectations around communication, availability. And there is a lot of missteps, I think, when COVID happened. It was unexpected, so a lot of companies just had to do it. They saw the flexibility, that was great. And then, so the companies I see succeed the most have just very clear parameters around which roles are done very effectively outside the office. How do we expect them to show up? How do we expect them to communicate? When and how do we contact them? I literally used to teach like etiquette classes to the people in the office on how to have a remote worker call into a meeting. Because the etiquette should be, you treat that person like they're a part of the meeting. You let them speak, you make sure that they're heard. So even if it's a little speakerphone on the table, which is how we used to do it before Zoom really took off, you listen to that person. And it's amazing how you have to train adults to listen and not interrupt and hear people talk. So we used to teach etiquette classes on meeting etiquette, on how to have a hybrid workforce. Sometimes we would have people in the office still jump onto Zoom because half the meeting was going to be on Zoom, so we might as well all be on Zoom. It's sometimes easier for everybody to be on video than only one. And so we would have those kind of parameters set up. And that's still good etiquette to carry into now. And when we talked about Slack yesterday, we would set communication expectations. So if I'm sending an email, I expect an answer within 24 hours. This was our work. If I'm sending a Slack message, I expect an answer within 1 hour. And if I call you, it means it's on fire and I need to talk to you now. And so those were the communication channels we set up, and we set the expectations accordingly. So if somebody gets a Slack message and they're wrapping up another call, they know I don't have to drop everything and do this in the next 5 minutes. I've got time, I can fill it in, but it is relatively more urgent than the email. And so we set urgency with those communication channels as well. So those kind of things make it really successful to work together when you're distributed. So, good question. All right, so I think we need to wrap up here. So please connect with me. We were at the end, I was glad, I wasn't sure what else was after that. Please connect with me. I would love to chat offline if anybody has any specific scenarios they want to run through. Love to brainstorm, love to talk about early team building, how to do it, how to grow. So you guys were very engaged, thank you. So.